Kayla Unbehaun was born on July 5, 2008 to Ryan Eskurka and Heather Unbehaun in the western suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. Ryan and Heather split up when Kayla was still very young, and a judge awarded Ryan permanent custody. In 2017, Kayla was spending July 4th with her mother. She was scheduled to be returned to Ryan the next day on her 9th birthday. The next day, however, Heather and Kayla did not show up for the court-ordered exchange, and the police were immediately contacted and an investigation was launched. It was discovered that all of Heather's social media had been deleted and her phone turned off. Police determined that Heather was last seen packing her belongings up to the roof of her car. Her closest family members indicated she went on a camping trip to an unknown location in Wisconsin and was expected to return on July 5th at 7 p.m. to return Kayla to Ryan. After Ryan filed missing persons reports for both Kayla and Heather, Heather was charged with child abduction, a Class 4 felony. Since then, South Elgin police pursued numerous leads and tips, working with police agencies from around the country in an attempt to locate Kayla and Heather. Ryan set up a GoFundMe page. He was appealing for donations and information to help with the search. He wrote on GoFundMe that he planned to use the assistance to hire a private investigator and any additional cost concerning the search for them and their health and safety for when they are found. The safety and return of Kayla is the top priority of all my family and I, and any help we receive through this funding is greatly appreciated, he wrote. Between July 2017 and May 2023, the page raised just over $2,500 towards its $10,000 goal. In November 2022, Kayla's picture was featured on an episode of Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries. At the end of the episode, called Abducted by a Parent, missing posters and age progression images are shown from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. For just under 5 seconds, a photo of Kayla at 9 appears on screen alongside a picture of what she might look like as a teenager. On May 13, 2023, a woman was doing her shopping at the Westgate Regional Shopping Center in Asheville, North Carolina. At upmarket consignment shop, Plato's Closet, the woman spotted a mother and her daughter. The woman recognized Heather Unbehaun and recalled that the child was missing. She saw the pictures on Unsolved Mysteries. The woman informed an employee of her suspicion. The store employee immediately contacted Asheville police, who contacted South Elgin police. Police officers then confirmed the identities of the two individuals as Heather and 15-year-old Kayla Unbehaun. 40-year-old Unbehaun was subsequently taken into custody. Kayla was quickly reunited with her father. Ryan said in a statement issued through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children that he was overjoyed that Kayla is home safe. I want to thank the South Elgin Police Department, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and all of the law enforcement agencies who assisted with her case. Ryan continued. I also want to thank all of the followers on the Bring Kayla Home Facebook page, who helped keep her story alive and were instrumental in spreading awareness. We ask for privacy as we get to know each other again and navigate this new beginning. South Elgin Chief of Police Jerry Krosick also thanked citizens across the country and other law enforcement agencies who worked so dedicatedly to help bring Kayla home. We are overjoyed to report that the child is in good condition and in good spirits since being reunited with her father, he said in a release. Following Unbehaun's arrest in Buncombe County, she was charged with the felony offense of extradition, which she declined to waive. She posted $25,000 bond and was released from custody, then turned herself in the following day in Kane County, Illinois, where she was booked on an abduction charge. The 40-year-old appeared before Judge Julia Yetter on May 18, 2023, and was released unbond with an electronic monitoring device. Ryan obtained an order of protection against Unbehaun, who is barred from being within 1,000 feet of his house and cannot leave Illinois without court permission. Unbehaun's next scheduled court date is June 14, 2023. Class 4 felony in Illinois can carry a sentence of 1 to 3 years, often probationary. 49-year-old Larry Fuller lived in Ignacio, Colorado in 2009. He worked as a diesel mechanic. Larry was married to Paula Silva, and the couple had 4 children together. They lived in Colorado since 2000. On the evening of December 31, 2008, Larry and Paula went to the Sidekick Bar at 677 Goddard Avenue to celebrate New Year's. Larry was shot by an unknown perpetrator. It was less than 2 hours into the new year. He succumbed to his injuries at the scene. Investigators at first believed the motive may have stemmed from an altercation that took place at the bar, but Paula told them that the couple had stayed out of any conflicts that night. Unfortunately, there were no witnesses and no real leads for investigators to go on. The case soon grew cold. Sadly, Paula Silva passed away in 2015 without ever learning who was responsible for taking her husband's life. In February of 2023, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation became the lead investigatory agency on the case at the request of the Ignacio Police Department. The agency put out a renewed request for the public's help. A lot of interviews were conducted by investigators, and it finally paid off. On May 18, 2023, 38-year-old David Hendren was arrested at the Navajo Nation in Arizona and was charged with taking Larry's life. Colorado Bureau of Investigation spokeswoman Lisa Kohlbrenner had this to say in a news release. Through the course of this years-long investigation, witness interviews were conducted by CBI, which subsequently led to David Hendren's identification and arrest. Kohlbrenner said the arrest is sealed and the agency cannot offer further comment on the case. Details such as where Fuller was shot, how many times, and the weapon used have not been released. Monica Escalante, Paul Silva's daughter, said her mother never got over what happened to her stepfather. She called the arrest unreal. Monica said the investigator who informed her of Hendren's arrest said Hendren told authorities he did not mean to take Larry's life but had mistaken him for someone else. "I never thought ever that they were going to figure it out," Monica said. "It's like a dream come true." Monica was 25 at the time of Larry's demise. Larry was like a father to Monica, and she described him as a deeply caring and capable person. Larry Slane haunted the family, Monica said. For years, she and her 2 brothers heard rumors in the community that various people had been involved. "You just lived in fear," Monica said. "And my mom, I don't think she ever healed from it. If she was alive, she would probably cry her heart out of happiness and sadness." David Hendren is currently awaiting extradition to Durango, where he will be jailed by the La Plata County Sheriff's Office. 16-year-old Sarah Yarborough lived in Federal Way, Washington with her parents and 11-year-old brother Andrew. Federal Way is a coastal city near Tacoma. Sarah attended Federal High School, where she was an honor student and drill team member. She loved art and dancing. On the morning of December 14, 1991, she drove to her high school to attend a drill team event. A few hours later at 9:40 a.m., 2 boys walking in the woods outside Federal High School stumbled upon a body. It was Sarah Yarborough's. The 2 boys had cut through a patch of bushes as a shortcut on their way to school when they made the horrific discovery. Sarah was found wearing her skirt and a sweater with her stockings wrapped around her neck. She had been strangled and assaulted. Investigators found and collected DNA from the perpetrator at the crime scene and stored it for further use. Sarah's car was found in the school parking lot. Investigators found nothing in the car that led them any closer to the attacker. The 2 boys and a jogger, also in the area that morning, worked with investigators to help create a sketch of a potential suspect seen shortly before Sarah's body was found. The unknown man had been seen leaving the bushes in a hurry and kept shooting the witnesses a series of suspicious glances as he trudged away from the crime scene. The sketch was shared around, but unfortunately, no one came forward that recognized the man. Students and staff at the high school were questioned, but investigators were unable to obtain useful information. With no real leads, the case grew cold. It was only in 2019, after using familial DNA, that police matched DNA from the crime scene to someone. Sarah's case was the first cold case to use genetic genealogy to generate investigative leads, according to Identifinders International. The man responsible was identified as Patrick Leon Nicholas. In October 2019, while sitting at a bar in Kent, Washington, Nicholas' trial started on April 17, 2023, at the Norm Malong Regional Justice Center in Kent. During his 2.5-week trial, Senior Deputy Prosecutor Celio Lee told jurors that Nicholas provided investigators with critical corroborating information. She also said, after leaving the safety of her car, her assailant led or dragged her into the bushes where her lifeless body was found. And as she was attacked, Yarborough scratched at the man as she fought for her life. Experts showed that DNA collected from under Sarah's fingernails and male DNA on her clothing came from a single male contributor. For years, the state admitted during the trial the DNA was run through the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, a database that has led to convictions in several cold cases. But Cody's never helped with Sarah's case. In 2019, King County Detective Kathleen Decker uploaded crime scene DNA to a different database and came back with 2 possible matches, Nicholas and his brother. The brother already had his DNA in the federal database. Eliminating him was easy enough for investigators. So detectives began surveilling Nicholas. They ultimately collected some cigarette butts and a used napkin he threw away at a strip mall. Then state police tested the DNA. They found their match. Had we had the opportunity and the ability years ago to run familial testing, we would have identified conceivably that brother, and it would have helped us to narrow down and figure out who ultimately was responsible for this particular crime, said Detective Kathy Decker. On May 10, 2023, Patrick Leon Nicholas was found guilty of all the charges against him by a jury. Judge Josephine Wiggins handed Nicholas a 45-year and 8-month sentence. This is virtually a life sentence for the 59-year-old. Sarah's mom, Laura Yarborough, had this to say: "We lived the last 30 years wondering when and if someone was going to be arrested, and knowing that was kind of a Damocles sword hanging over your head, and you never knew when it's going to fall. When we lost her, our family was irrevocably changed. The trial's like a marathon. It's a slog. I didn't realize it was going to be quite this draining or exhausting or go on so long," said Laura. This conviction is not Nicholas's first time getting the maximum sentence, either. In 1983, he was convicted of first-degree assault and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was released after a little more than 3 years. The victim in that case and crony also gave the victim impact statement, bravely facing Nicholas in court once again. Why was a repeat offender allowed to be released after serving less than half his sentence? Asked N. She also said Nicholas had 2 assault convictions prior to her attack that started with a seemingly friendly conversation at her car. "He reached through the open driver's window and put a knife to my throat and told me to take off my clothes," she said. "And I ran as fast as I could and dove into the river, and I swam harder than I ever swam before until I couldn't anymore. If he had still been in prison, he would not have been around to take away our daughter," Laura Yarborough said. The family said nothing will bring Sarah back or take away the pain they feel daily, but they get some comfort knowing Nicholas won't be able to hurt anyone else. Sarah's younger brother, Andrew, also spoke. He does not possess the ability to experience remorse or feel emotions the way normal people do. He does not belong in the free society with the rest of the people in this room. "I recall the pain in my father's voice over the phone telling me that Sarah was not alive anymore. I recall the sounds of my parents crying through the walls at night as I laid in bed." Nicholas was also ordered to pay restitution to the Yarborough family. The amount will be determined at a later date. Sarah's family added, "They're extremely grateful to every investigator who has worked so hard over the last 30-plus years to bring Sarah's slayer to justice." 59-year-old Carol Reef lived in Gloucester Township, New Jersey. She had an apartment in the Lakeview apartment complex. On June 21, 2013, Gloucester Township Police Department officers responded to the Lakeview apartment complex to check on Carol after she never showed up to a planned trip with family members and was not answering her phone. When officers got into her apartment, Carol was not there. Her keys were still in her apartment and her car was in the parking lot. She was subsequently officially reported as missing. Then 4 days later, detectives found Carol Reef's remains in a wooded area behind an old maintenance building for the complex, located off Lower Landing Road, not far from Route 42. An autopsy was unable to determine what exactly happened to her due to decomposition. During the initial investigation, potential DNA evidence was recovered from a pair of Carol's jeans, as well as an empty beer bottle in her apartment. Unfortunately, at the time, DNA testing did not produce conclusive results. Over the years, Advances in DNA analysis have helped open new doors in the investigation, specifically equipment that can collect evidence, leaving the hope that the perpetrator would soon be found. Detective Jeremy Jankowski of the Camden County Prosecutor's Office said, "It has always been my hope that when they close this, it's going to protect other people from having to suffer through this as a family and for the loss of life." Then, on May 11, 2023, 59-year-old Joseph Grissoff was arrested and charged with taking Carol Reef's life. Grissoff was arrested by the U.S. Marshals Service Camden Division in Morristown. He was then held at the Camden County Correctional Facility as he awaits a detention hearing. Following the arrest, detectives revealed Grissoff, who was a maintenance worker who lived near Carol's apartment, was interviewed at the time her body was discovered. Officials said Grissoff told police during that interview that he would regularly see and admitted to complimenting her in the past. He also claimed that he had never been inside her apartment. Despite that claim, recent DNA testing revealed the strong proposition that Carol and Grissoff were both contributors to DNA profiles obtained from the jeans and the beer bottle that were found in Carol's apartment. Gloucester Township Police Chief David Harkins said, "The Gloucester Township Police Department and the Camden County Prosecutor's Office have never forgotten about Carol Reef. Since her disappearance on June 21, 2013, and the discovery of her body on June 24, 2013, we have worked to get justice for Ms. Reef and her family. We will use all means necessary to achieve justice and prosecute those responsible. It is our duty to be the voice for victims and their families, and we take this responsibility very seriously. I am very proud of the collaboration and teamwork of the detectives who have worked countless hours, which led to this arrest today." In August of 2014, human remains were found in the trunk of a car in the 2700 block of Powhatan Street near the intersection with Seminary Street in Alton, Illinois. Those remains were identified as those of Jose Randolfo Pagoda, a Honduran national 52 years old at the time. The identification leaned heavily on DNA science due to the level of decomposition of the body. At about the same time, a Mexican national who was in the country illegally was identified as a suspect. He is Odilon Villagrangadino. In April of 2021, he was arrested in Mexico. On May 16, 2023, the 56-year-old was extradited to the United States and is now in custody at the Madison County Jail. Unfortunately, there is not a lot more information on this case. At approximately 5:35 p.m. on September 4, 2012, officers from the Yonkers Police Department responded to a 911 call about a suspicious package being found in the woods. Upon arriving at the scene, first responders found a decomposing human body that was wrapped in a large, black garbage bag. Detectives with the department's Major Case Squad and Crime Scene Unit took over the investigation and were able to identify the victim as Bronx resident, 26-year-old Pamela Graddick. Investigators determined that Pamela had been shot twice in the head at a location outside of Yonkers and dumped in the woods in an attempt to conceal the crime. Police identified Wanda Vaglia as a person of interest early on in the case. She was the girlfriend of Pamela and they lived in the same apartment. A month before Pamela's body was found on August 13, 2012, Vaglia told Pamela's family that she had returned after the weekend to find Pamela gone, but items she should have had with her were still there. When Pamela's relatives learned that she had not shown up for work that morning, they reported her missing to New York City Police. Investigators were unable to explain how the petite Wanda Vaglia could have moved the larger Pamela's body to the secluded area in the woods from their apartment. Following a 2-year investigation, authorities were unable to come up with enough evidence to charge anyone, and the case was transferred to the Yonkers Police Department Cold Case Unit. In January of 2022, during the interview, Vaglia confessed. She said that she shot Pamela inside of the Bronx apartment they shared due to ongoing domestic issues between them. She said that she got the weapon from John Torres. Torres helped her move the body from her apartment to the woods. In March of 2022, both Wanda Vaglia and John Torres were taken into custody. Torres was charged with second-degree criminal facilitation, first-degree prosecution hindering, and tampering with physical evidence, all of which are felonies. City of Yonkers Police Commissioner John J. Mueller said in a statement following the arrests, "The passage of time only reinforces our commitment to solving these heinous crimes. The Yonkers Police prides itself on focusing on victims and their families, and doing whatever we can to deliver justice for them. I hope that these arrests bring some degree of closure to Pamela's family and friends, and I applaud the extraordinary efforts of our cold case detectives in closing out this case after so many years well done." In June 2023, Wanda Vigea was sentenced to 20 years to life for taking Pamela Graddick's life. Pamela's sister, Tawana McClellan, had this to say in court: "You took my sister from me. You took my sister from all of us, and I hope that burns in your soul." "23-year-old Renee Sweeney lived in Sudbury in 1998. Sudbury is a city in Ontario, Canada. Renee was a music student at Laurentian University and worked at an adult video store to help pay for school. It worked with her schedule, and it was quiet so she could do her homework when no one was there. On January 27, 1998, Renee was working at the video store in Paris Street. A man entered the store shortly before 11 a.m. and approached the counter. He stabbed Renee 30 times and then stole $200 from the cash register. The man then went to the washroom to clean up. When the man emerged from the washroom, he was surprised to see Renee was still alive. She was behind the counter trying to dial a number on the telephone. Renee then fought with the man and managed to scratch him, but she unfortunately succumbed to her injuries. The man was seen running away from the store. Police who arrived at the scene a short while later were able to collect large amounts of evidence from the scene. Police tracking dogs were able to recover a lightweight windbreaker-type jacket and white cotton gloves in a wooded area nearby that belonged to the suspect. The perpetrator's DNA was also found under Renee's fingernails and in the store's washroom. As the unknown man was seen running from the store by witnesses, they were able to give investigators a detailed description. He was described as white in his early 20s with dark short hair, weighing 140 to 150 pounds, roughly 5 feet 10 inches to 6 foot tall with a slim build. He was also believed to have been wearing glasses. A sketch was shared around in Sudbury with hopes that someone would come forward and identify the man. 2 weeks after the crime, on February 11, 1998, Sudbury police announced that they charged 31-year-old John federally with taking Renee's life. Not long after, they realized they made a mistake and released him the following day. It was stated that the evidence did not hold up. A reward for information was originally posted at $25,000 and grew to $30,000 as more and more people were made aware of the case. Despite investigators having collected DNA belonging to the perpetrator, a match was not identified through the National DNA Database. Greater Sudbury police officers continued to check every 30 days. In 1999, investigators requested that men in the area provide a DNA sample so that they could be ruled out. On December 2, 1999, hundreds of men submitted their DNA to Sudbury police, making it the largest collection of DNA for a single police investigation in Canadian history at that time. On March 23, 2000, New Brunswick serial offender Michael Wayne McRae was named a possible suspect in Renee's case. He was convicted of taking 7 other people's lives. Nothing concrete was found linking him to Renee's slaying, however. On April 30, 2003, Sudbury police launched the ReneeSweeney.com website to help collect tips about the crime. For Renee's family, the wait for answers was agonizing. Her mother, Carol Strachan, released a CD of music titled Remembering Renee Sweeney in 2006. Her sister, Kim Sweeney, said in 2017 that she doesn't remember much about the minutes, days, and weeks following the news of what happened to Renee. Kim was in school at the time when she got a call from her stepfather telling her that something bad happened and she needed to come home. Her first thought was that something must have happened with her mom, who had multiple sclerosis. I had a bad feeling about the whole thing and wondered why I was not being told to go to the hospital instead. But I got in my car and headed home right away anyways, she said. I would usually drive past Renee's work, but for some reason I did not that day. When she got to the house and heard her mother crying, she knew something else was going on. They told me that Renee had been shot, because that's what they thought initially, Kim continued. So I went to grab my coat, wondering why we were all just standing around the house. But then they told me she wasn't with us anymore, and I just dropped to my knees. From that day forward, their lives changed forever. My mom never walked again, she said. It was just too hard for her to deal with. Her condition deteriorated pretty badly after, and she never really came back from it. And in November 2017, her mother passed away without ever finding out who took her daughter's life. I wished that she had a chance to close that book, Kim continued. Kim and Renee's biological father, who also had multiple sclerosis, took his own life in 1990, and her stepdad also passed away in recent years, leaving Kim with not a lot of remaining family members. What breaks her heart the most, she says, is the fact that her own 2 young children will never get a chance to meet their aunt. They would have loved her, she said, and she would have loved them. She wonders what Renee would have done with her life and where she would be today. I still think about it and her every day, said Kim. I just keep having these same questions run through my head. Why would someone do this? Why her? Is he still out there? I think that sometimes people just don't want to get involved, but I can't express how important it would be to finally get justice for my sister, she concluded. If there is any information or anyone who remembers anything, I hope they remember and realize that the case has not been closed. In 2017, the Greater Sudbury Police Service announced they had been working with Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based technology company that specializes in DNA phenotyping. On January 23, 2017, they released a composite sketch of the perpetrator using DNA technology called Snapshot. The term refers to a process that can predict the appearance of a suspect based on DNA evidence. Constable Megan O'Malley of the Greater Sudbury Police said the composite has provided police with more accurate information about the suspect's physical traits. We do know that he is of European descent, that he has light skin, he has either blue or green eyes, brown or blonde hair, and might have freckles. From 2017 to 2018, Sudbury Police received 360 tips from the public after the image sparked new public interest in the case. Of those tips, about 200 possible suspects were eliminated through DNA testing or other means. Who's the lead investigator on the case said in 2018, the fact that this has gone unsolved for 20 years is mind-blowing and frustrating at the same time. He also said it is difficult to investigate a crime that happened so many years ago, but he's determined to push the case forward and ultimately find the man responsible. The more you get involved in a case like this, you almost build a relationship somewhat with the victim. At the end of the day, the focus is on Renee. I still remain confident that the suspect will be identified. By late 2018, investigators had followed up on thousands of tips and ruled out 1,800 people. As 20 years had passed, most people assumed the suspect would never be caught. So it was a shock when on December 12, 2018, Sudbury Police announced that they arrested 38-year-old Robert Stephen Wright and charged him with taking Renee's life. His DNA matched the DNA belonging to the perpetrator. Wright was an 18-year-old Lockerbie Composite School student at the time of the slaying. He was arrested in North Bay where he worked as a lab tech. We have been actively investigating information and tips throughout the past 20 years and up until today. Wright has made a number of court appearances since then. He was denied bail in March 2019 and in May 2020. On October 8, 2020, a judge ruled that Wright's trial will be held in Sudbury. This followed a change of venue motion filed by his lawyers, arguing that years of media coverage would make it difficult to find an impartial jury in the city. Stephen Wright's trial finally got underway on February 21, 2023. Wright denied any involvement. He said that he was finishing an exam at Lockerbie High School in Sudbury on the morning of January 27, 1998. Wright said he was wearing a teal jacket, long-sleeve t-shirt, jeans, gloves, and running shoes that cold morning. After his exam, Wright said he had some time to waste and decided to check out the adults-only video store on Paris Street. Wright testified he could not see inside the store before entering it, as the doors were dark and covered. Wright told the court the first thing he noticed when entering the store were video boxes strewn across the carpeted floor. The next thing he said he noticed was a substance had spilled onto the floor, but testified that at the time his brain did not register that it could be blood. Still processing what he was seeing, said Wright. He made his way further into the store until he saw Renee Sweeney's body on the floor. Wright told the jury he moved towards Sweeney's body to see if she was still breathing and to check for a pulse, which he said was something he learned during his days as a Boy Scout. He said he used his right hand to shake Renee's shoulder and asked if she was okay, but ultimately he said he could not detect anything, not breath nor pulse or any movement. Suddenly, Wright said he backed away from Renee, overwhelmed. He told the court he realized there was blood on his jacket and that he was freaked out. He told the court, "I ran because I was terrified. I was a stupid kid. I wish I had stayed. I can't describe what was going through my mind," Wright said. "I was completely overwhelmed at that point. I just wanted out of there." Wright told the jury that when he got up from the body, he had to stabilize himself and grabbed a hold of something, but doesn't remember what. Wright was asked if he was aware of a cash tray on the counter where a fingerprint matching his DNA was found, and added that he was not sure what he grabbed onto while trying to steady himself. Wright said he did not flip the money clips of the cash tray up and that he did not steal anything from the store. He said the next thing he remembers doing is crouching down, grabbing his teal jacket and gloves and running away. Wright was asked why he decided to discard his jacket and gloves. "I realized at that point that I had run from a crime scene, and I was terrified that I would be accused. The worst decision in my life was to run. I did not even know if I consciously made that decision." After that, Wright said he briefly thought about going to a friend's house, but decided against it as he did not want to involve anyone else. He said he took the first bus home in Valkyrin from the City Center Mall in downtown Sudbury. Wright said he arrived home to an empty house that afternoon. He told the court he never told anyone about what happened, not even his parents. "I just wanted to distance myself from the whole thing and forget about it. It was very traumatizing. I did not want to worry them, and I was also ashamed of running." There were lots of inconsistencies with Wright's story. It did not explain how his DNA got under Renee's fingernails and in the washroom. It also did not explain how his fingerprints were found under the cash box. No one else was seen at the crime scene, and no one else's DNA was found. On March 29, 2023, he was found guilty of all the charges against him. The jury delivered its verdict in the Sudbury courthouse after deliberating for a little more than a day. A cheer went up from the side of the courtroom where the Sweeney family was sitting, and people hugged each other with tears in their eyes. There were also tears in the eyes of Wright's mother, and his father gave a meek wave as they watched their 43-year-old son be led out of the courtroom by police officers. With Renee's sister Kim standing next to her grinning, family friend Kelly Irvine told reporters they were thrilled and ecstatic with the jury's decision. "Renee Sweeney got justice today after what horribly happened 25 years ago," Kelly Irvine said. "Justice Robbie Gordon will sentence 43-year-old Stephen Wright on June 29, 2023. It is expected to be a sentence of 25 years. Renee's sister Kim had the last word in her victim statement. "Do you know what it's like to have lost your best friend? I have, and there aren't any words in the English dictionary that describe the hell that losing Renee has caused my family. I had to look at that jacket that was covered in the blood of my sister and be reminded of the brutality. I am asking to sentence him to the maximum sentence possible. We have lost 25 years of our life. He should get 25 years to think about what he has done." 29-year-old Wendy Augie lived in Bellingham, Washington in 1987. She was a beauty school student and the mother of 2 young children. Wendy was last seen leaving La Paloma restaurant in Bellingham during the early morning hours of April 25, 1987. She was driving her 1972 Ford Torino, which was painted red with a black vinyl top. Wendy was accompanied by the restaurant's bartender, a drifter, who called himself Mike Johnson. Little did she know his real name was Darren D. O'Neill. Wendy has never been seen or heard from again. Her car was found abandoned in Eugene, Oregon on May 2, 1987. O'Neill's fingerprints were inside. When authorities searched Wendy's apartment after her disappearance, they found signs of a struggle, as well as blood, male DNA, and soaked bedsheets. An all-points bulletin was issued for O'Neill. He had worked for the La Paloma restaurant for only 2 days before he disappeared after emptying the cash register and stealing liquor. The United States Customs authorities reported photographing him driving across the border into Canada. He was apparently alone in the vehicle at the time. When investigators finally caught up to O'Neill, he was incarcerated for another crime, but more on that later. Frustratingly, without Wendy's body, investigators did not believe they had enough to convict O'Neill for taking Wendy's life. The case went cold. In 2015, the Bellingham Police Department received a report from the Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory on evidence found at Wendy's home. The lab used the male DNA found at the crime scene and entered it into the state and nationwide databases. They were able to match it with O'Neill's DNA. Then, on March 1, 2023, it was announced that 63-year-old Darren D. O'Neill was charged with taking Wendy Augie's life. He was extradited from Oregon, where he was serving a life sentence for an unrelated crime to Washington State. He is currently being held on a $10 million bond. O'Neill refused to tell investigators where they could find Wendy's body. O'Neill was born on February 26, 1960 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was drafted into the Army and had to move to numerous cities including Bavaria, Germany, and Fort Oak, Louisiana. He was discharged on February 28, 1982, and that is where his crime spree began. It started with public indecencies in Colorado Springs. In November 1984, O'Neill was charged with assaulting a woman, but she ended up disappearing and the charges were dropped. In 1987, O'Neill moved to Puyallup, Washington and found a truck driving job in Tacoma. During the evening of January 17, 1987, O'Neill spotted a 14-year-old girl walking on a freeway to a convenience store. O'Neill abducted the girl, assaulted her, and then released her a few hours later. He then moved to Edgewood, Washington, where he found work as a laminator under the alias Herb Johnson. O'Neill took 22-year-old Robin Smith's life on March 27, 1987. Her body was found in his car. It was then, on April 24, 1987, that he took Wendy Augie's life. After that, he moved to Tennessee and ultimately Lakeland, Florida, under the alias John Mayo. On September 22, 1988, police pulled O'Neill over for a traffic violation, but he attempted to escape, prompting a chase. O'Neill attempted to escape on foot after crashing his car into a curb, but was soon caught. O'Neill was positively identified as the person responsible for what happened to Robin Smith through fingerprint analysis. In January 1989, O'Neill agreed to a guilty plea in Robin's case in exchange for a reduced prison sentence. O'Neill was sentenced to 27 years and 9 months in prison, the maximum sentence available under his plea deal. In Oregon, he was sentenced for all his assaults and kidnappings. He was given a total sentence of 135 years in prison. O'Neill is the prime suspect in the kidnapping and slaying of 22-year-old Leah Elizabeth on June 9, 1987. Leah was heading from Twin Falls, Idaho for Boise to reach the airport where her fiancé, Dwayne Abbott, was meeting her. Leah experienced car trouble on Interstate 84 near Mountain Home. A friend she called from a truck stop was the last person to hear from her. When she did not arrive at the airport, her family reported her missing. On June 13, 1987, motorists east of La Grande, Oregon discovered her body. She had been strangled. Several witnesses saw a man matching O'Neill's description at several nearby locations along the interstate, as well as in Spokane, Washington, hours after Leah Zubert went missing. O'Neill is also suspected of the failed kidnapping of a woman in Burley, Idaho a week after, though no further details have been provided. Darren O'Neill is currently awaiting trial in Wendy Augie's case. Dispatchers received reports of shots fired on Winship Street in Hartford, Connecticut on June 22, 2019. When officers arrived, they found a man in his 30s who had been shot. He was transported to Hartford Hospital and underwent emergency surgery. The man has since recovered from his injuries. A second man was found in a vehicle nearby. The man was not alive anymore and had been fatally shot. Authorities identified the man as 24-year-old Eros Diaz. He lived in Avon, Connecticut. Eros's family offered a $500,000 reward for information leading to arrest and conviction. After a lengthy investigation, police said 35-year-old Gino McMahon of Hartford was identified as a suspect. McMahon was arrested on June 13, 2023, and charged with taking Eros's life. A motive has not been made public, but it was noted that both Eros and McMahon were involved with illegal substances. Witnesses came forward placing McMahon at the crime scene as well as DNA on a hat found near the crime scene. He is being held in lieu of $3 million bail and is set to appear in Hartford Superior Court on July 10, 2023. Were shot on June 22, 2019, at about 9:30 p.m. in the area of 25 Winship Street after they were involved in a car crash. Eros Diaz was shot in the head and pronounced deceased at the scene, and Lugo, who was found about a block away from where the shooting took place, suffered multiple gunshot wounds and was initially listed in critical condition. Eros' mother, Catherine Diaz, said, "We have worked and prayed for this day to come. We never gave up hope that my son's attacker would be brought to justice. I truly hope that our effort to get the perpetrator off the streets protects other mothers from the loss of a child or a loved one. We are thankful for the many members of the criminal justice system who worked for 4 years to help my family begin to heal." Laurel Jean Mitchell was born on May 24, 1958, in Whitley County, Indiana, to parents Richard and Wilma Mitchell. She grew up in North Webster, Indiana with her siblings, Sarah and Bruce. With a population of about 500 at the time, North Webster was extremely safe. A place where residents often did not lock doors. Where parents felt comfortable letting their children ride bikes up and down the traffic-free streets. It was a community where everyone knew each other, and folks spent hours hanging out on their front porches. By 1975, 17-year-old Laurel was a senior at Wawasee High School. She was employed at Cokesbury Inn in the Epworth Forest neighborhood on the shores of Webster Lake. For her, working at the restaurant was a perfect opportunity to gain valuable experience while earning some extra money. She was determined to make the most of every moment, and with this attitude, she threw herself into the job with all the energy and enthusiasm she could muster. In no time, Laurel Mitchell had become a favorite among the staff and the customers. Laurel was involved in a local church youth group and was part of a traveling singing called God's Children. They traveled all over the United States singing. The group had made some records and had a couple of albums. Laurel was described as very, very religious. Most of her free time was spent at the church. Despite the occasional argument, Laurel and her siblings had a tight-knit bond that only grew stronger with time. Laurel was a beloved figure in the community, where her warm smile and demeanor won over the hearts of everyone she met. One of her most endearing qualities was her unwavering kindness and her caring nature. The neighborhood children were particularly fond of Laurel. It was not uncommon to see her surrounded by children, all clamoring for her attention. Laurel had many talents. She had a natural gift for singing, so it was no surprise that she was a key member of the local church choir. Laurel was also an accomplished dancer who honed her skills by taking lessons at a local studio. For Laurel, singing and dancing were more than just hobbies. They were a way of life. August 6, 1975 started out as a typical day. Laurel and her siblings had morning chores that they completed. Laurel went to work at around 2 p.m. 12-year-old Sarah stayed home. Their brother Bruce was married and in the Army in California. One of Laurel's friends from Michigan stayed with the family. Laurel left work at the snack bar around 10 p.m. She was supposed to meet friends at the Adventureland amusement park about a half-mile walk away. One of her coworkers offered Laurel a ride, but she declined and said she'll walk instead. Laurel was seen walking towards the amusement park on the north side of North Webster. This was the last time she was seen alive. It was a family friend named Scott Pruitt who saw Laurel at the pillars of the entrance of Epworth Forest. He waved at her and she waved back at him. She then went past the pillars. Laurel never met up with her friends. They decided to go to the county fair instead. This included the friend from Michigan. As a result, No one was aware that Laurel was missing until she did not come home at midnight. Laurel was responsible, known to call her parents if she was going to be late arriving home. When she did not return home by curfew that night, her family knew something was wrong. It was confirmed when the friend from Michigan arrived at the Mitchell's house and asked, "Where is Laurel?" Her friends thought she went home, and her family thought she was with her friends. This led to her parents, Richard and Wilma Mitchell, reporting her as a missing person at 4:16 a.m. the next morning. The dispatcher took their information and promised to send a unit out to their home to take a report. An extensive search was then launched by the police, family members, and friends of Laurel. Richard Mitchell went out and walked the ditches up and down the road in case she had been hit by a car and thrown off to the side. Concerned neighbors and friends gathered together to search for her by combing through the woods and checking roadsides. Investigators determined that Laurel never made it to Adventureland. It was clear to them something happened on the way there. A few hours after being reported missing at 10:30 a.m., a fisherman named Glenn Dixon and his son found a woman's body in the Elkhart River at the Mallard Roost Public Access Site on Noble County Road, 600 North, just west of 400 West. They called 911. The officers waded into the water and pulled the body up onto the bank. They reported seeing a white female laying face down on the west bank of the river near the boat landing ramp. The body was floating about waist deep. State police could not immediately identify the woman. They estimated the body had been there about a day. Police checked out missing persons reports in the area fitting the victim's description. She was described as 5 feet 5 inches, weighing about 160 pounds with long brown hair. Police then identified the woman as Laurel Mitchell with her class ring from Lawsea High School. Class of 1976 with her initials LJM engraved inside. At first, investigators believed it was an accidental drowning, despite Laurel being a strong swimmer. That was until the autopsy report came back. The autopsy was performed later in the day on August 7, 1975 by Dr. P. L. Senke at the Goshen General Hospital. The autopsy showed that she was forcibly drowned as well as assaulted. The autopsy also showed signs that Laurel made a violent struggle in order to survive. The police speculated that much of the evidence of the crime had washed away in the water, as only a small bruise was present on Laurel's hand and a few abrasions under her arms. After the discovery of Laurel, police vehicles pulled up outside Laurel's parents' home. Richard and Wilma were anxiously waiting for any news of their daughter's whereabouts. They were not prepared for the news that was about to be delivered to them. As the officers told them what had happened, Richard's eyes filled with tears. Wilma as well was inconsolable. Laurel's funeral was seen as a testament to the sense of community in North Webster. There were so many flowers at the funeral home that there was no room for the people. An enormous crowd of well-wishers, friends, and family members had come to pay their respects to Laurel Mitchell, who had been taken from them far too soon. They had to move the funeral to the church. Laurel's sister, Sarah, said that she does not remember the sermon at all. "I just remember sitting between my dad and my brother, and they were both squeezing my hand so hard. When we walked out the door of the church, there were people lined up all down the street that couldn't even fit inside the church." The investigation into Laurel's demise intensified after her funeral, with detectives from multiple state and local agencies working round the clock to solve the case. They combed through evidence and interviewed many more individuals. A person called investigators at 3:15 p.m. on August 9, 1975. The person had some important information, but it was not clear. The caller hung up before they got the full message or her identity. Investigators made an appeal for the person to contact them again, and they would do their best to keep her identity private. Police set up a headquarters for the continuing investigation in North Webster. One local witness, identified as Catherine Flynn, said around 10 p.m. that night she car turned around next door. She said she heard voices say, "Let's get her." Investigators interviewed Catherine, who lived half a mile east of Epworth Forest on Epworth Forest Road. She said she was home on Wednesday, August 6, 1975, and that around 10 p.m. or a little later, an old car turned into the drive next door and turned around as it came back by her house. She informed investigators that she heard several voices say, "Let's get her." She said the car was very loud and probably a dark color. Another local, Frank Overmeyer, told investigators he also heard a loud vehicle in the neighborhood, possibly an Oldsmobile Cutlass. They went to interview Frank Overmeyer and his wife on August 14, 1975. The Overmeyers lived on Epworth Forest Road, just west of Epworth Forest. Frank Overmeyer said on August 6, 1975, he was at home watching TV and heard a loud car go by, and the car turned around and stopped east of their house. Frank reported he then heard what he thought sounded like someone slamming the trunk on a car. Frank reported he turned on his porch light and stepped outside. When he stepped out, 2 cars were leaving the area. The first car was the one that had gone by his house that he described was a red-orange GM product, possibly an Oldsmobile Cutlass. The second vehicle was a medium green Mustang. The Oldsmobile was very loud and sounded like it was loud by design. All of the clothing and belongings found on Laurel's body were collected and preserved for DNA testing, including shoes, a sweatshirt, bra, underwear, and denim jeans. Unfortunately, due to the lack of DNA technology at the time, there was little that could be done with the clothing. Detectives from the Kaskaskia County Sheriff's Department and Indiana State Police examined the case closely through the years. The location of Laurel's abduction and the discovery of her body in the Elkhart River, about 15 miles from Epworth Forest, seemed to indicate that the perpetrator was familiar with the area. Many people were interviewed, and despite there being a $5,000 reward offered, there was never enough evidence to charge anyone. As weeks turned into months and months into years, the case slowly faded from the headlines and went cold. Laurel's family and friends, the pain of her loss remained. In 2007, Indiana State Police Captain Kevin Smith was assigned as the lead investigator on Laurel's case. He was a man on a mission and was determined to provide answers that had eluded Laurel's family for so long. The pressure was on, but Captain Smith knew that he would do whatever it takes to give Laurel's loved ones the closure they deserved. Despite his best efforts, no new leads or evidence surfaced for several years, leaving him and his team frustrated. Then, on January 16, 2012, Laurel's father, Richard Mitchell, passed away. He was a well-known public figure in North Webster. Laurel's mother, Wilma Mitchell, also passed away in 2012. She operated the North Webster Food Pantry for several years. They passed never knowing what exactly happened to their 17-year-old daughter, or why. It was a heartbreaking end for a couple who had dedicated their lives to seeking answers and closure for their daughter. In 2013, a woman called Renee from Port Charlotte, Florida came forward and gave investigators a lot of useful information. Detective Dunafin interviewed Renee on June 7, 2013. She informed the detective that she lived in Noble County as a teenager, and that she was 16 years old in 1975. She went on a date with a man named John Wayne Lehman, and while on the date, they went to a party. After the party, John Wayne Lehman was driving her home when Lehman admitted his involvement in a crime that he committed with his friend. Fred Bandy Jr. Lehman provided details of the crime to Renee that are consistent with the findings made by police where Laurel's body was found and the anatomical findings made by Dr. Sankey during the autopsy of her body. On July 3, 2014, investigators interviewed Bill McDonald at the Ligonier Police Department. Bill indicated that back in 1975, he was a sophomore at West Noble High School and that he socialized with a man named Fred Bandy Jr. Bill told investigators that Bandy told him that he had committed the crime that took place at Mallard's Roost, which was a public access site adjacent to the location where Laurel's body was found. Also in 2014, Captain Kevin Smith received information about a local music group that performed in Epworth Forest the night of August 6, 1975. They were identified as the Celebrate the Sun group. This generated renewed interest in the case. Unfortunately, it did not lead anywhere. Captain Smith said, "I feel pretty confident after speaking with someone from that group. I don't believe they have information that will help." On September 25, 2019, Noble County Sheriff's Department Detective Joe Hutzel met with Rick Johnson to interview him about the Laurel Mitchell case. Rick Johnson informed Detective Hutzel that he was friends with Bill McDonald, and that while he was in high school, he, Bill McDonald, Fred Bandy, John Wayne Lehman, and others were at a party together. While at the party, a conversation about the slaying of Laurel Mitchell came up, and Fred Bandy Jr. stated he and John Wayne Lehman committed that crime together. They needed DNA evidence linking Bandy and Lehman to the crime. Advances had been made in cold cases in recent years due to new technology such as genetic genealogy, which involves putting a suspect or victim's DNA profile into a public database, allowing them to reverse engineer a family tree. This enables investigation of multiple branches of a family's tree to determine who could be a viable suspect in an unsolved case. Another recent advancement factoring into solving cold cases is the use of touch DNA samples. This method requires minuscule amounts of DNA, such as skin cells from the perpetrator, that may be left on objects at a crime scene. A breakthrough enabling an accurate genotype from rootless hair is another technique now available. Until 2019, forensic scientists were only able to extract DNA from hairs found at crime scenes if the root of the hair was attached. Unfortunately, most hairs do not have the root attached. This breakthrough in DNA extraction from rootless hair is extremely useful in solving crimes. Solving cold cases often involves a diligent and time-consuming re-examination of evidence and the efforts of experienced investigators. By 2019, Laurel Mitchell's clothes and evidence were resubmitted for DNA testing. In February 2020, a certificate of analysis was generated by Indiana State Police Laboratory Division that showed a male DNA profile was developed from the clothing. After 3 suspects were eliminated as possibilities, attention shifted to Fred Bandy for a buccal swab. Bandy voluntarily provided the DNA sample on December 5, 2022, at his residence. On January 13, 2023, the state laboratory found that Fred Bandy Jr.'s buccal swab showed he is 13 billion times more likely to be the contributor of the DNA on Laurel Mitchell's than any other unknown person. A review of Indiana State Police records also disclosed that Bandy was driving a 1971 Oldsmobile at the time, which is consistent with eyewitness statements from area residents on that fateful night. Investigators concluded that Lehman and Bandy, with premeditated malice, used Bandy's Oldsmobile to bring Laurel to the Mallard Roost public access site in Noble County, where they forcibly removed her from the vehicle and deliberately drowned her. While the Indiana State Police declined to comment on the specific techniques used to solve the case, Ashley Hall, the director of the Forensic Science Graduate Program at the University of California, explained. She said the methods seem to be a standard genetic identification technology used in tandem repeat. The technology is developing to become more and more sensitive. It is being developed to pick up smaller and smaller amounts of DNA. We can pick up much more DNA than we used to be able to. Laurel Mitchell's case is a good example of the power and evolution of DNA testing to assist in criminal investigations. Dr. Hall said, "We're not done with our work until the fact that we can go back to cases that are this old. This is where we should be going," she said. Captain Kevin Smith, who has been working the case for over 20 years, said, "This case is a culmination of a 5-decades-long investigation, and science finally gave us the answers we needed." Playing a significant role in charges being filed was the Indiana State Police Laboratory Division. "We simply could not have solved this case without them." He also said that the investigation of the case had followed a similar pattern of other such cases. Witnesses pass away, memories fade. All those hurdles make it very difficult, especially when you go back this far. On Monday, February 6, 2023, the Indiana State Police arrested 67-year-old John Wayne Lehman and 67-year-old Fred Bandy Jr. It was announced to the public that John Lehman and Bandy Jr., both 67-year-old residents of Indiana, have been identified as the suspects responsible for what happened to Laurel Jean Mitchell. Bandy lived in 1014 Fifth Street in Goshen, Indiana, and Lehman lived at 108 Clark Street in Auburn, Indiana. Both are being held without bond at the Noble County Jail. This is not the first time that Fred Bandy Jr. is in trouble with the law. He is a twice-convicted child abuser and deemed a violent predator. In 2001, he pleaded guilty to child solicitation and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. In 2016, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of child abuse and served nearly 6 years. During an initial hearing on February 8, 2023, Bandy and Lehman were informed by Noble Circuit Court Judge Michael Kramer they each face a charge of taking Laurel's life in the first degree. With current Indiana law, An individual convicted of such a charge faces a prison sentence between 45 and 65 years, with the advisory sentence being 55 years. However, since Laurel's slaying occurred in 1975, if the men are convicted, Bandy and Lehman could be sentenced to life in prison, which was the maximum possible prison sentence at that time. Also during the initial hearing, a pre-trial conference for both Bandy and Lehman was scheduled for 1:30 p.m. on April 24, 2023, in Noble County. Laurel's sister Sarah, who was 12 years old back in 1975, recently did an interview with the New York Times after the arrests were made. She described their childhood in North Webster as typical before the horror visited her family. It was just a very small town, laid back. We felt safe, she said. We came and went as we pleased in the summer and parents did not worry about us. She was a really good person. It's like, gosh, you picked somebody really good to do this to. Somebody who could have done a lot of good in this world. I'm very glad they were finally arrested and very appreciative of the people who came forward. Sarah recalled how Captain Smith had carried around big books that detailed the names and addresses of everyone the authorities had interviewed over the years. There were over 1,000 names in there, she said. When Captain Smith called Sarah and her brother Bruce Mitchell to let them know they had arrested 2 men, she was surprised, but mostly wished her parents had been alive to see it. It has been 47 years, she said, but right now it feels like yesterday. 12-year-old Sarah Mitchell was the only one that could sleep that night when Laurel did not arrive home. She woke up the next morning, more surprised than anything that her sister Laurel hadn't come home yet. Young Sarah had a softball game that day and her parents encouraged her to still go to the game. About halfway through the game, a neighbor woman showed up in the Mitchell family's car. I saw her pull up to the ball diamond, Sarah said. Sarah immediately yelled at her coach that she had to go. The neighbor only told her that she had been sent to pick her up. When they neared the house, it was swarmed with police cars. The neighbor said they're there to look for her sister. I walked in the back door and there was my dad. He was crying, Sarah said. He told her that Laurel was gone. Gone, she asked. It did not register in her 12-year-old mind. Gone where? Then her father broke the news. Her big sister, the one who used to have to take her everywhere because, well, that's what big sisters have to do, was not alive anymore. Sarah also said what she thought of Lehman and Bandy when she first saw them in court. At 12, they would have been scary. They look like very frail men and do not need to be afraid of them. I am glad they are going to be punished, that they won't be able to hurt anyone else, but she's still not coming back to us. Convictions would not bring closure for me. I do not think there is such a thing. We will continue to grieve. "51-year-old Thelma Bointville lived in the quiet North Shore neighborhood of Pupukea, Hawaii in 2017. She was married to Kevin Emery. They had an 8-year-old daughter named Makana. Thelma was a teacher at a local elementary school. In order to make some extra money for her family, she cleaned units in a Hawaiian vacation rental. She enjoyed activities such as surfing, running, yoga, martial arts, and baking. On Thursday, December 7, 2017, Thelma picked up Makana at Sunset Beach Elementary School and went to a nearby vacation rental house on Keiki Road, whose owners were clients of Thelma's cleaning business. Makana stayed in the Toyota Tacoma pickup truck watching movies while her mother went inside the double-story home to clean it. Shortly after entering the residence, Thelma walked in on a couple who was busy burglarizing the property. 23-year-old Stephen Brown and his 20-year-old girlfriend, Haley Danderand, got access to the house through an unlocked window. They asked Thelma to lay down, tied her hands, then they beat her with a baseball bat and strangled her as well. Brown then went out to Thelma's truck and told her daughter to get out and come with him. He callously told Makana that they ended her mother's life. Brown carried the girl to an upstairs room, followed by a dander end. They duct-taped her mouth and tied her to a bedpost. The couple left the scene in Thelma's truck. A short time later, a couple, tourists from Australia, who were renting the home, walked inside and discovered Thelma's lifeless body. They heard movement inside and immediately left to call 911. The incident was reported around 3:20 p.m. Police responded to the call and discovered Thelma's lifeless body tied up and lying in a pool of her own blood. They also found a hammer, knife, and mallet next to the body. Makana was upstairs, uninjured, and tied to the frame of a bed. Thelma's husband, Kevin Emery, learned what had happened when investigators informed him via a phone call. He was not allowed to enter the house. He then rushed to comfort his daughter in an ambulance at the scene. Thelma's daughter told police that a man with green hair came out of the residence and took her inside. A woman with pink hair helped him tie Makana to the bed. The case gained significant media attention after Garrett McNamara posted an emotional Facebook video. He is the twin brother of Kevin Emery, Thelma's husband. In the Facebook video, he said that he is offering $100,000 for any information leading to the suspect's apprehension. The 35-second clip went viral. "I have $100,000 cash right now for anybody who can tell me who just tied up and duct-taped my niece and caused her mother to lose her life at Keiki Beach at the north shore of Oahu," McNamara said. $100,000 right now. If you can tell me who just slayed my twin brother's girl." Makana also told her father about the appearances of the suspects while in the ambulance. Somehow, Kevin's twin brother, Garrett, found a photo of the couple and texted it to him. It's not clear where the photo came from, but Kevin posted the picture on Instagram with a promise of a $100,000 reward, and a civilian manhunt for the suspects ensued. Kevin also took the photo to the police still at the scene. "I told the police officer that these are the people who just took my wife's life," Kevin recalled. "I calmly asked Makana as she was shaking if I could show her an image to see if it's the couple she saw. And she immediately said yes as she pushed the phone away from her." Fortunately, Makana did not see her mother's body that day. That evening, law enforcement arrested Brown and Danderand when the truck was spotted in a Walmart parking lot in Mililani Town Center. Surveillance footage from the Mililani Walmart store showed Danderand buying an untraceable mobile phone. She apparently still thought they would escape the crowd of police and civilians that waited for them outside. She paid for the mobile phone with Thelma's bank card. She had the card in the front pocket of her hoodie. When the stolen truck was found in Mililani, police said there were at least 75 civilians there looking for the suspects. 2. It had been 7 hours since the body of Thelma Boy Neville was discovered when authorities arrested the couple suspected of taking her life. They spent the weekend in jail and appeared before a Honolulu County judge on Monday morning, December 11, 2017. Brown's bail was set at $1 million. And Danderand's was set at $500,000. 23-year-old Stephen Brown was allegedly combative and uncooperative when he was detained, officials stated. He spontaneously uttered, "Just shoot me. I deserve this." 20-year-old Haley Danderand made a similar plea to police. "Can you just pull your gun out and shoot me in the head?" she asked. "My life is over after today." The sad news had rocked quiet North Shore neighborhood. Friends and family members were grieving the tragic loss of Thelma's life. At a vigil on Friday evening, December 8th, Thelma's friend, Virginia Herbert, was still in shock over the news. She did everything she could to be with people, Herbert told Honolulu News Now. She would celebrate life. Thelma's husband, Kevin, attended the vigil and announced he had already made peace with his wife's attacker. "It is very hard for me to say this right now, but I forgive you," he said in a video. "To the persons who did this, I know this is an act of evil. Love your friends, love your neighbors, love your families," he said. For unknown reasons, the case then stalled and was deemed cold by some. It appeared as if the couple might not be guilty, as was first assumed. Delays in the trial had led to public outcry and unrest. More than 5 years after the brutal slaying of Thelma in the Hawaiian vacation rental, the court case started in 2023. Stephen Brown and Haley Danderand were charged with taking Thelma's life in the second degree, as well as burglary in the first degree and kidnapping. Brown was the first of the 2 defendants to face a jury in Thelma's case. Haley Danderand is yet to go to trial. She has previously pled not guilty. During his trial, Brown, who took the stand in his own defense, had attempted to pin the blame on his girlfriend. The couple smoked marijuana before entering the house. "I thought we were just going to hang out," Brown said. He accused Danderand, who was armed with a machete, of demanding Thelma to lie down so the pair could restrain her by tying her up. "We asked her to lay down," Brown stated during his cross-examination. "She was cooperative." Brown testified that he left to go surveil the property and claimed that when he came back to his girlfriend, she had fatally injured Thelma. He said that Thelma was unharmed and perfectly fine when he momentarily left the property. However, during closing statements, Deputy Prosecutor Scott Bell said Brown was the only defendant with the physical capacity to restrain Thelma. According to the medical examiner, Thelma Boyneville had wounds caused by a blunt object and sharp force injuries to her head and sustained 31 injuries to her body. His defense attorney, William Bagasol, questioned the state DNA expert. He held up a hammer, knife, machete, a meat tenderizer, and a bat to confirm none had evidence of Brown's DNA on it. Despite the fact that his DNA was not found on the objects, the 12-person jury deliberated for less than half a day and determined that 28-year-old Stephen Brown is guilty on all 4 counts. It was on Friday, January 20, 2023, that Stephen Brown was found guilty of taking Thelma's life, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of burglary. Brown showed no emotion and stared straight ahead as the verdict was read by the judge. On January 24, 2023, a circuit court trial jury determined that it is necessary for Stephen Brown to be subjected to an extended sentence for the protection of the community. That verdict gave Judge Rowena Somerville the option of life without the possibility of parole. He was scheduled to be sentenced on May 10, 2023. It has not been made public yet what his sentence was. Haley Danderon's trial is set to begin in July 2023. She entered a not guilty plea to the charges against her. Tricia Joseph was a 56-year-old mother and cafe owner from Fort Jones, California in 2005. On July 15th of the same year, she went missing from her home. She left her duplex apartment without her glasses, contact lenses, purse, or cell phone. There were also several drops of blood found on her bed. Her body was found 3 days later in the Klamath River in California by a she was only partially clothed. It was determined during her autopsy that someone had taken her life. She had suffered from blunt force trauma and had been strangled. 5 years later, in 2010, an arrest in the case was made. Philip William Frace was arrested after a witness came forward and made a statement that indicated that Frace was involved in Patricia's case. Frace was a marijuana grower from the Laytonville, California area. Patricia reportedly worked as a trimmer for Frace sometime before her life was taken. Frace, at the time, was in the Mendocino County Jail awaiting trial after being charged with taking the life of an employee, Stephen Richard Schmidt. Stephen was a 49-year-old transient who had been living in a motorhome on Bell Springs Road, Laytonville, California, where Frace resided as well. Stephen's body was found by a cadaver dog, where he was tied to a tree. Frace was eventually sentenced to 3 years in prison for that crime. In Patricia's case, Frace was released in 2012 by the Siskiyou County District Attorney without being charged due to a lack of evidence. Unfortunately, the detectives did not have any other leads to follow up on, so the case went cold. In 2021, the sheriff's office created a cold case and forensic evidence team to review Patricia's case and resubmit evidence to the Department of Justice for fresh analysis. The team prioritizes cold cases and reviews physical evidence using modern tools. Finally, on February 6, 2023, 75-year-old Philip William Frace was arrested again and charged with taking Patricia's life. The Siskiyou County Sheriff Jeremiah LaRue, who worked on the case, said that the analysis produced compelling results connecting Frace to Patricia's demise. The arrest is a result of the determination of our investigators and reflects our faithful commitment to pursuing justice for victims of violent crimes and their families. Our cold case team will continue to focus on these cases with dedication. I would like to commend everyone for their devotion to this investigation and thank the District Attorney's Office for their assistance. Our hearts are with Patricia's family, and we hope this arrest begins the path toward closure and healing. On a Facebook page dedicated to Patricia's memory, our family said that, "The time for justice is long overdue, and we miss you like crazy, Mom." Brace remains in custody on a $2 million bail, as well as an additional $15,000 bail for a failure to appear charge. Terry Turacek was a 35-year-old woman who lived in Denver, Colorado with her 3 young children in 1996. On October 5, 1996, in her apartment in the 1900 block of East 17th Avenue, Denver police and medical personnel found her body. She had been hit by a blunt object to her head. She had been strangled as well. Witnesses told investigators that they could hear there was a disturbance in her apartment the night that her life was taken. The detectives took DNA samples from her body, but they could not match it to a possible suspect. There were no witnesses and no real leads for investigators. The case subsequently went cold. In January 2023, 62-year-old Ricky Dawson was extradited to Denver, after his DNA was matched to the DNA found at the crime scene in Terry's case. He was 35 years old when he took her life. Terry's brother James had this to say after the extradition: "We never forgot. We never gave up. It became very real when they tell you he is being extradited." Detectives with the Denver Police Department conducted a criminal background check for Dawson and found that he was arrested in Denver in August and September of 1996. Those records showed that he was in the Denver area around the time that Terry's life was taken. Dawson is currently in the Shawnee Correctional Facility. His DNA was matched to a Panama City, Florida case of 2001 on August 8, 2004. He has pleaded guilty to taking that person's life and assaulting them. Dawson's sentence in the 2001 Florida case included a 25-year prison term, which he was still serving when he was extradited. Dawson, through DNA evidence, is also suspected in an execution and assault case in Seattle in 2000. The victim's injuries and the manner in which her life was ended were similar to Terry's case. Seattle police continue to investigate if he is responsible for that crime, and their case has not yet been presented to the King County prosecuting attorney. In February 2023, Dawson appeared in court in Colorado for Terry's case, where he was charged with taking her life and assaulting her. Terry's brother James said, "They have enough evidence, I guess now, to charge him and hopefully make it stick, and literally put him away for the rest of his life on paper. She was a great mom. Everything was for her kids," James remembered. He says time hasn't gotten easier through the years. Family goes on, it'll never get filled back up. It's a huge chunk that none of us will ever know how it ended up, said James. She would have enjoyed having grandchildren. So much lost, just a beautiful soul. He hopes his sister gets the justice she deserves soon. "I know it's good to forgive. That's not me now. Maybe someday, but now no," said James. "My hope would be that he would get the execution penalty, but I know that's not possible in Colorado," said Sarah Oakland, Terry's daughter. "So I think we're all hoping that he rots in jail, and we wanted to let him know that we didn't forget." Cynthia Ruthwood was a 33-year-old mother of 3 children staying in Bradenton, Florida in 1984. She worked as a manager at the Cape Vista Child Care Center, also in Bradenton. She was in the process of divorcing from her husband, Barry Wood, and was in a custody battle. She had 1 son from a previous marriage and 2 children with Barry. Cynthia was accusing Barry of physically abusing her and her son from the previous marriage. One day, when picking up her children from the Cape Vista Child Care Center, she met a man, Donald Michael Santini, who came to pick up his girlfriend's children. Detectives believe now that this was all a plan to befriend her. On June 6, 1984, Santini contacted Cynthia and informed her that he has information on Barry that she can use against him in the custody case, and asked her out on a date. The 2 of them met at her house, where he would pick her up to go out on their date. She was seen by neighbors leaving her Manatee County apartment with Santini. That would be the last time Cynthia was seen alive. On June 9, 1984, her body was found in a water-filled ditch in Riverview, Florida. The autopsy determined that she was strangled, and Santini's fingerprints were found on her body. Investigators issued an arrest warrant for Santini. When they tried to locate him, they found that he was on the run. Santini's trouble with the law began 6 years earlier in 1978, when he was convicted of assaulting a woman while serving in the U.S. Army in Frankfurt, Germany, according to a 1985 Herald article. Upon returning to his home state of Texas, He was charged with aggravated robbery in connection to a convenience store robbery in 1983. He confessed, then he disappeared from the state just days later. A witness, Pamela Lynn Kincaid, came forward on June 15, 1984. This was 6 days after Cynthia's body was found in the ditch. She stated that she knew Charles Michael Stevens. This was an alias used by Santini. He confessed to her that he took Cynthia Wood's life. Santini befriended Pamela and moved in with her before meeting Cynthia. Her children attended a daycare center just a few blocks away called Cape Vista Child Care Center in Florida, where Cynthia worked as a manager. It was clear to investigators that Santini was responsible. His fingerprints were found on Cynthia's neck. They had witness statements from Pamela. There was also the link to the child care center. But frustratingly, investigators could not locate Santini. That was until 2023. In June 2023, almost 40 years later, a tip from the Florida Caribbean Regional Fugitive Task Force led U.S. Marshals to Campo in San Diego County, California, where they arrested 65-year-old Donald Michael Santini. He was known in Campo as Wellman Wells Simmons. He served on the Campo Lake Marina Community Planning Group, as well as president of the board of directors for the Lake Marina Views Mutual Water Company, a troubled water district where nitrate contamination has left district residents forced to drink bottled water for the past 3 years. Billy Joe Janin, chair of the planning group, told East County Magazine, "Everyone was surprised. There was nothing unusual about him." The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office said in a statement that, "We are aware of this arrest and have sent detectives to interview Santini while we await his extradition." At the time of his arrest in June 2023, he had 13 aliases, including Donald Chapman and John Trimbalin. During his extradition hearing, the judge had the following conversation with Santini. "Good morning, Mr. Santini," the judge said. "My understanding is that you are admitting you are Donald Santini. Is that correct?" After Santini answered in the affirmative, the judge sought to make sure, saying, "And you are the person that is wanted in the state of Florida. Is that correct?" Again, Santini said he was. On June 9, 2023, the anniversary of the day on which Cynthia's body was found, and Santini's birthday, Santini agreed to be extradited from San Diego to Florida. He said he does not feel safe because of the victim's family, prompting the public defender to tell him to be quiet. Santini is currently being held without bail. Michael Running Jr., a deputy district attorney, said, "Regardless of whether the case just happened yesterday, or in this case it's something that is 40 years old, we want to make sure that justice is achieved." Florida Gulf Coast University forensic professor, Dr. David Thomas, said the following, "Due to the nature of how Cynthia Wood lost her life, Santini likely left a lot of evidence behind for investigators to gather all those years ago. There is this thing called low cards exchange, meaning that what is on me usually is left at that crime scene. So I'm going to leave some part of me there. So it may be in her clothes, it may be on some part of her body, but there's something that he left there at that scene and they were able to collect it. So kudos to them," he said. And it is evidence that Dr. Thomas said, if stored correctly, can still be processed. Usually, the case is literally in a box that is stored in a room, and most likely that room, depending on if the room is temperature controlled, can probably last forever, he said. Dr. Thomas also said this break in a decades-old cold case is likely bringing a small sense of relief to the detectives who first worked it. It became very personal to them because it is the victim and that investigator that are tied to the hip. And that investigator is tied to that family, he said. If Florida authorities fail to extradite Santini within 30 days, he would have another hearing on July 10th at 8:30 a.m. in the San Diego Central Courthouse. Her family was informed by the police department, but they have not yet released a statement after news of the arrest was made public.